Hey guys, for those who don't know me, my name is Heidi and I am a first year vet student at Auburn University. Today we're going to be talking about MMI, multiple mini interviews. So get a pen and paper, get ready to learn, and let's dive into this. To start off prepping for multiple mini interviews on the day of, make sure that you show up to wherever you are taking this multiple mini interview via Zoom early. I'd say about 30 minutes early because 10 minutes before you're going to click the link for the Zoom multi-mini interview. Make sure that you have good internet and a charged laptop or device that you are taking the Zoom on. I highly recommend a laptop, and make sure you know where your camera is so then you can look directly at the camera. So multiple mini interviews are usually 3 to 6 scenarios or questions that you will be required to answer best to your abilities. For one of the schools that I applied to, which was Lincoln Memorial, was multiple mini interviews. And it set up like a Zoom meeting, and then there are 3 different scenario-based questions that you will go through. What I did to prepare for this is prep for about 3 days before. Luckily, my interview was on a Monday, so I basically had the whole weekend to prep for this. But what I did was I started to sit down, I reviewed some vet topics, I got on Google, and I researched some hot topics in the veterinary community. That way, if there was something that I was missing, I was well aware. So number one thing that I would say to do when you're prepping for a multiple mini interview is research the school that you're applying to. Obviously, you should know about it if you applied to it, but research it a little bit more in depth. What was the latest in their news article about their school? What's going on with maybe a university thing that they're trying to incorporate? Maybe there's a program that you just want to take part in or want to ask questions. This will come in handy at the end of the interview. Something that you can check into at your university, if you're still at your university, is a career services that will offer mock interviews. And if this isn't the case, then maybe you are part of a vet tech pre-vet program that has a bunch of faculty that would be happy to offer you a multiple mini interview. This isn't always the case, but it's something to look into and maybe make a difference for the future generation at your school. If your multiple mini interview is on Zoom, this is going to be important that you practice looking directly at the camera. They don't want to see you looking down or looking away. They want to see you looking at the camera. The third thing that I'm going to recommend for multiple mini interviews is make sure that you bring a pen and paper to write down anything down so then you can maybe jot your thoughts down in response to the question. The other thing is to have a list of 4 or more questions for your multiple mini interviewers. So after each interview scenario, that person who is interviewing you might ask you if you have any questions for them. This is very important that you respond to them with a question so that you can show your interest to their school. Number 4 on my list is when you are in the interview, make sure that you are paying attention to what they are saying and being respectful to their time and everything, so then they understand that you are committed to being there. So what I did in my interview was, if I had to look down at my piece of paper to write notes down, I said, hey, do you mind if I can look down at my piece of paper? Or in response to this question, I'm gonna just jot some things down if that's okay. This is so then they don't think that you're looking off to the side, looking something up. It's just you're allowed to do this. In multiple cases, you are allowed to do this in multiple mini interviews, especially on Zoom. This only applies to Zoom. If you are in person, unfortunately, I did not get to experience in-person multiple mini interviews. However, I am sure that it's probably the same. Just be respectful and let them know what you're doing with that piece of paper and pen. Interviewing with multiple mini interviews, they're gonna ask you a scenario for each question or just a question on how you feel about something. It's important that you basically ride the line between both situations and sides, so then you see both sides. As a veterinarian, it's going to be important that we understand the client who's coming in, as well as the patient, as well as the side of the veterinarian. Just make sure that you're applying both sides and both considerations when answering your multiple mini interview scenario or question. For my interview, I had 3 questions and 3 scenarios. With each scenario, there was a question tied to it on how I would handle it, and in one of my interviews, they asked a follow-up question in my response on what I was saying. Then there was another question and scenario that I was asked that, to be honest, I had no idea what in the world it was about. I really did not. But I answered it to the best of my ability, taking the information that I was given, as well as understanding the public's viewpoint and the veterinarian's viewpoint. The topic that it was about had nothing to do with veterinary medicine at the present moment, and was about something that I honestly had no idea was going on in the world. But I answered it as a scenario base that applies to a veterinarian and something that is public related that might be misconstrued in the public. So make sure that you are paying attention to anything in the world that could be used in your multiple mini interview, just as a simple, like, if people don't understand this client education moment in regards to salt lamps, how would you better soothe the community in their concern for salt lamps? It's just a little example of how, just make sure that you're understanding the community and the other side of the scenario. Thankfully for that interview, I didn't get asked follow-up questions, and he went immediately to, do you have any questions for me? And I was like, thank goodness, because I had no idea really what even I was saying. I was just going, honestly, by God's grace. The most important thing that I could say is make sure that you smile in multiple mini interviews. There's too many people that are so nervous that they forget to smile, and that shows who you are. You smile, don't you? You might not, but just make sure to smile and enjoy the moment, and laugh if you need to. Sometimes the interviewers share a story that's really funny. And make sure that you ask the questions, like I said before. They want to know that you're interested in the school. Sometimes professors, faculty, or career services have an interview room that you can use for the time being of the interview. However, this is not always the case. I was just lucky enough to have a fantastic faculty and career services that offered me an interview room for me to take my interviews in. In another situation, I ended up using a professor's office just because I almost missed my interview. And that is why it is important that you make sure you know what time your interview is and you double check it. My multiple mini interview was on a Monday, and I ended up getting there 30 minutes early, maybe even a little bit longer because I was a little bit nervous. But I got there and I set up all my stuff, and I had a notebook, pen ready for my questions to be jotted down, my thoughts with, and then also questions for the faculty. I made sure to update my Zoom the night before, maybe even a couple days before, and practice Zoom with someone to make sure that it was all in order. And then I sat there in the dreaded silence waiting for the Zoom to start. Once it started, I was placed in a breakout room, or a waiting room actually. So then I was seated with a bunch of other interviewers, and I made sure to smile and show my excitement. Maybe it was going to help someone else in that interview room. Then we proceeded to breakout rooms where I had to click the OK button on Zoom, and then I would go into my first breakout room. The prompt was on a piece of paper on the screen, and I read it, and I was given 2 minutes to answer. 2 minutes to read it, and I think it was 4 minutes to answer it. And so make sure that you read your question carefully, slowly, jot down some thoughts. Even if you don't need to, it's good to jot it down so that you are aware, and then if you start talking, then you know what you forgot to say. Make sure to practice what you're going to say and practice talking to someone before you go into this interview. After the first question, he asked me any follow-up questions, or he asked me any questions that I had about the school, and I would ask him. The majority of the time, my interviewer got cut short answering my questions because then the time was up and I got put in the next breakout room with the next question. This happened a total of 3 times, and then my interview was concluded and I was told to exit out of the Zoom. I didn't hear from Lincoln Memorial for another 2 weeks, and when I did hear, I did get accepted, but I was accepted for the spring by accident of what I put on my VMCAS. So just be careful which button you press on your VMCAS, and know which cohort that you are interviewing for, because it could potentially be for January. You never know. With that being said, good luck, guys. You're gonna do great.